Rod agonists elected Lieutenant John D. Bulkeley, commander of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. His first-hand actions during early boat trades are some of the most vivid and documented accounts of these mosquito craft, and his perspective provides the strongest emotional anchor for the story. You do not fight a navy with plywood. For decades, that was the rule. Every admiral, every strategist, every textbook insisted the same truth: naval warfare was the domain of steel giants. Battleships with 14-inch guns, cruisers with armored bells thicker than a man's arm, destroyers that could outrun storms. Against that, a 77-foot wooden boat weighing barely 50 tons? A craft so small it shuddered in heavy seas. A vessel armed with 4 torpedoes and machine guns bolted onto planks? No serious navy respected such things, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, fresh off victories at Shanghai, Malaya, the Philippines, mocked them openly. They called them mokusen, wooden toys, not ships, not threats, annoyances at best. But in 1942, one man stepped forward to break that rule. One commander who believed these mosquitoes could become predators. And in the dark waters of the Pacific, Lieutenant John Bulkeley would make entire Japanese convoys vanish. John Bulkeley was 32 years old. Compact, intense, and relentlessly stubborn. He wasn't born into privilege, nor did he rise on pedigree. He fought for every posting, every promotion, every command stripe sewn onto his sleeve. When he took command of Squadron 3 in the Philippines, his boats were barely finished, their engines temperamental, their torpedoes unreliable. The Navy considered boats experimental, auxiliary craft, not real combat units. Bulkeley disagreed violently. He drilled his crews at night until they could reload guns blindfolded. He tested engines until the decks trembled under their feet. He forced his men to learn every screw, every valve, every weapon, because he knew that small boats don't win on size. They win on skill. But around him, the Pacific was collapsing. December 1941. Japan struck everywhere at once: Pearl Harbor, Hong Kong, Guam, Wake Island, Malaya. The Philippines, cut off and outmatched, were left to fight alone. Japanese convoys rolled south with thousands of troops, hundreds of ships, and overwhelming. If the Philippines fell, Japan would dominate the South Pacific. If Japanese convoys sailed unchallenged, nothing could slow their advance, and every conventional US warship had already been sunk, damaged, or forced to withdraw. So the last offensive naval capability in the region wasn't battleships. It wasn't cruisers, it wasn't destroyers. It was 8 wooden boats under Bulkeley's command. 8 boats against an entire navy. He knew his enemy dismissed him. He knew they laughed at the idea of plywood in combat. But he also knew something else night belonged to the small, the fast, the fearless. And on one moonless night off Bataan, facing a Japanese convoy of transports and escorts, Bulkeley pushed his throttles forward and committed himself to the impossible. The engines roar. 3 Packard motors scream at 1,800 revolutions per minute, shaking the whole hull. The bow lifts. Spray slams into your face like handfuls of ice. Bulkeley's 41 surges into the darkness. No lights, no radio chatter, only the hum of engines and the sound of men breathing through clenched teeth. Ahead, 9 Japanese transports, 3 armed escorts, 1 destroyer, all heading toward Luzon, all expecting no resistance. Bulkeley grips the wheel and whispers the order: hold course. Keep it dark. He counts the range by instinct: 3,000 yards, 2,400 1,800. Searchlights snap on across the water, white beams slicing through night. Hard starboard. The boat heaves sideways as tracer fire rips overhead. 1-inch shells burst in the water womb, sending geysers of spray across the deck. The smell of curdite mixes with gasoline fumes. The wooden hull vibrates under each near miss. The destroyer opens fire. 5-inch shells were passed deep. Thundering booms that punch holes in the night sky. A single hit would turn Bulkeley's boat into splinters. Every man aboard knows it, but he keeps closing. 1,200 yards, 900 yards. A distance destroyers consider suicidal. The torpedo man crouches over the starboard tube. Sweat drips down his face. Bulkeley shouts, "Stand by, fire 1." The torpedo leaps from its tube, a white plume marking the shot. Fire 2. Both weapons plunge toward the convoy. He cuts hard port. Engines scream. Tracer lines chase the boat across the waves. Then, behind them, crack a com. 1 Japanese transport of 5 Tsurusato Tentruk ship erupts in flame. Men on deck scatter, shouting. Bulkley sees silhouettes running in panic as ammunition cooks off in bright flashes. Before he can celebrate, the destroyer turns toward them. Bow cutting the waves, guns firing. Searchlights lock onto 41 like a spotlight on prey. Bulkley shouts above the wind brace. Coming around. Another shell lands 30 yards off the bow boom, rocking the boat so hard one crewman is thrown into the cockpit wall. The destroyer closes to 2,000 yards. Then 1,500. Then 1,200. Every instinct to flee, but Bulkley doesn't break. He circles around the burning transport, using its flames to mask his position. Japanese gunners fire wildly, blinded by their own ship's inferno. He slips out of the smoke's island, invisible, pointed directly at the destroyer's exposed flank. 700 yards, 600, 500. Fire 3. The torpedo streaks away. For a long second, nothing happens, then boom. The destroyer jerks sideways as an explosion tears into its aft quarter. A plume rises 80 feet into the air. Its guns fall silent. On deck, frantic commands echo in Japanese voices. A destroyer, hit by a plywood boat. And this is the moment the Japanese Navy realizes these toys can kill. Mid-roll CTA if you find this kind of forgotten history as fascinating as we do. We'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of courage, sacrifice, and ingenuity deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. Shells burst so close fragments slash the hull. Gasoline fumes fill the air. The heat from burning ships churns the night fog into a shimmering curtain. One of his engines coughs, backfires, stutters. They're down to engines at full power. He shouts, keep her steady. 900 yards, 800. 700. 41 bucks as it slams through a wake. Crewmen grip the railings, knuckles wake. Machine gunners fire at silhouettes on Japanese decks. Bulkley lines up the shot. He feels the timing. He senses the range. Fire 4. The last torpedo leaves the tube with a sharp hiss. A tense, agonizing pause, seconds stretching like minutes. Then another blasting, other transport struck. Another Japanese formation thrown into chaos. Convoy broken, formation shattered. Landing timetable destroyed. By dawn, the transports are sunk. One destroyer is crippled. The Japanese convoy scatters. And the Americans, all 8 boats, survive. In a single night, the mosquitoes become monsters. What the Japanese hiked and didn't know was that this wasn't a one-night miracle. It was the beginning of a campaign. Over the next months, boats strike again and again. Ambushes at 40 knots. Torpedo attacks from 800 yards. Hit-and-run raids that leave Japanese commanders furious and humiliated. Convoy losses force Japan to change routes, add escorts, slow landings. Every delay buys precious time for American and Filipino troops. Japanese officers begin issuing new orders. Destroy the boats on sight. Do not assume they are harmless. Treat them as destroyer threats. Admiration replaces mockery. Fear replaces laughter. By war's end, boats conduct over 800 missions, sink or damage dozens of enemy ships, and save thousands of Allied soldiers, including General MacArthur himself during the famous escape from Corregidor, carried out by none other than Bulkley. The mosquitoes rewrite naval doctrine. They prove small craft can deliver strategic impact far beyond their size. And it all begins in those early Philippine raids. John Bulkley loves to see the world acknowledge what his men achieved. He earns the Medal of Honor. He commands ships into more wars. He retires as a vice admiral. But the story isn't just his. It belongs to the men of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. Young sailors in their 20s, engineers from Iowa, gunners from New York, mechanics from Texas, ordinary Americans who faced steel giants with wooden hulls and refused to back down. Many never returned home. Their names echo quietly through Navy records, their stories overshadowed by larger battles, but their impact was real, and their courage undeniable. This story matters now because it reminds us that underestimated people, given purpose and leadership, can defy impossible odds. It shows that arrogance is a weakness and innovation a weapon. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state. and tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that John Bulkeley and the men of Squadron 3 do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.